I think that given that they represent us as a nation, they are our elected representatives. If they lie, it trickles down. We don't know what the truth is. We watch it in America. We see Trump decrying anything that's truthful, calling it fake news, and it's happening over here. No, we're not going to ban meat. No, we don't want 7 dustbins for every people. No, we don't want this and that. If they lie, what happens to the rest? Corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
OK, but I mean, Nile, we've seen this ridiculous, farcical situation of time and taxpayers' money being wasted, dragging Boris Johnson through a kangaroo court. We're going to have that every week in this situation, aren't we?
Yeah, Patrick, thanks for having me on the show today. And certainly my view is that the calls from Caroline Lucas to make lying a criminal offence by MPs, I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. After all, the left, I think, lie all the time. You look at Project Fear, the endless lies about the supposed impact of Brexit coming from left-wing politicians. And so there's a huge amount of hypocrisy that comes from the left when they call for this. Also, it's very Orwellian, in my view, to call for investigations into what MPs are saying, whether or not it's the truth. Who decides that? And so I do think that this is a ludicrous call from the left, who are, of course, as guilty as anyone of making endless lies. And we saw that especially during the Brexit campaign with Project Fear.
I mean, Jeni, the thing is, with stuff like this, it could backfire quite easily, where every single politician is done for lying because they haven't stuck to a manifesto pledge.
Listen, I would just like to go back, Neil, to you talking about the 23rd, when we voted to leave. On the side of a bus, it said £350 million that was taken every week was going to go into the NHS. That was a lie. And I think, whether you're left or whether you're right, we, the populace that vote them in to represent us, have to be told the truth. Otherwise, we're swimming around in a sea of deceit. We don't know what's going on.
Look, I can understand exactly what you're saying, but I will, Nile, say, should the Greens especially not be worried what they wish for here? Because there's a lot of misinformation flying around about the urgent, pressing need for net zero, a lot of climate alarmism taking place there. And I do worry that Caroline might find herself, frankly, in a prison cell.
Yeah, I think that all of these claims from the left about the climate alarmism and so on, and underestimating, for example, the costs of net zero. I mean, it's a disgrace. I think the propaganda coming from the left, and outright lies and disinformation coming from the left on so many fronts. The reality is that net zero will be vastly expensive, and it could well bankrupt actually the British economy. But you're not going to hear that from the Green Party or for the lefties, who are now claiming that the Conservatives are lying on various fronts. So the hypocrisy here is absolutely staggering, I have to say, Jeni. Huge hypocrisy.
Okay. Niall, we had a prime minister. We had a prime minister that when he opened his mouth, he just spoke untruths. Now, the fool that I am, believed him until it was proven that he was lying. Now, you're not allowed to call anybody a liar in government. What do we do? Who do we turn to? Who is telling the truth? There's your truth.
Who are you talking about, Jeni? Who are you referencing? And what
Boris,
evidence are you...
Mr. Boris Johnson, who runs away. There he is. There's the boy who feeds us fibs.
I'll tell you what is interesting with that, Jeni, because, right, it is obviously not a unusual view amongst the public, maybe not with a lot of GBNews viewers, etc. It's not an unusual view amongst the public that Boris Johnson was lying a bit about Partygate or all of that stuff, right? But when it came down, Nile, to some messages and to whether or not he'd caught a glimpse out of his eye about whether or not he'd seen a party and going upstairs, what they did him for was what they had to decide, based on their own merit, what he thought was going on in his own mind at that time. That is so subjective. Do I really want MPs to be subjected to the political views of anybody at any moment in time to go, I think you were really thinking this, and therefore you're a liar, and you're going to face prosecution. That is open to all sorts of problems.
Yeah, great points, Patrick. I do think the treatment of Boris Johnson was an absolute disgrace. Democratically elected prime minister, removed by a kangaroo court, in effect. And I do think the treatment of Boris was absolutely shameful. And I think it was a dark day in British history here. And I think the points you make are absolutely
Jeni,
right.
Jeni, we've seen some examples. One very egregious example, by the way, against Nigel Farage, of MPs standing up in Parliament and using parliamentary privilege to perpetuate what actually turned out to be completely false conspiracy theories that some other people ended up paying quite a lot of money for, actually. So it's not really just a right or a left issue, this, really. I do think that there appears to be an idea that we're going to do this because then we stop the Tory liars. But then I think, well, all right, but there's just as many a year as well, you know?
I think that if somebody decides to become a politician, we secretly vote in a box, in a ballot, and we ask somebody to be our mouthpiece. Back in Greece, when they decided to do it for the populace, we should be doing it now. What strikes me is that our political system is muddied and sullied, and none of us trust. And when we're looking at the further generation, the next generation coming down the line, I mean, I've had my day. Who do they listen to? Who tells them the truth? What is the truth? Whether it's on television, whether it's on the radio.
But people sometimes...
And it worries me.
Jeni, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. Jeni, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. If we honestly live in a world now where, you know, genitalia is not enough to define what sex you are, we live arguably in a post-truth era, Niall. I mean, who defines the truth?
Yeah, that's a good point here. And I have to, say here that, these calls from the left to define the truth are sinister and nefarious and dangerous, actually. And it's designed to inhibit also, I think, freedom of speech. And we cannot go down that path where you have left-wing politicians defining what they believe is
listen, I will quote Jesus Christ. And he said...
Right, strong on a second. Strap yourselves in, lads. There we go. Right.
Unto thyself be true. Listen, unto thyself be true. We have to have a conscience. And people who listen to politicians have to trust what's coming out of their mouth. And I don't.
Right, Jeni, do you think that left-wing politicians are inherently more truthful than right-wing politicians, Jeni?
That's a great question, and I can't answer that. I only know a few that are on the very far left, and I became what I became because they told me a truth. When Wedgie Ben stood up and did what he did, and back in the day when I was growing up, I now get confused when people are protecting themselves and protecting positions that don't help anybody.
OK, Niall, same question to you.
Patrick.
Yeah, come on.
Patrick, a quick point about that. So I'm actually here in Washington, D.C. at the moment. Of course, we have the Biden presidency in office. Joe Biden is a left-wing politician, the most powerful left-wing leader in the world. He lies all the time. I mean, he lies about his own past, his own record. And I think, that's clear proof, frankly, that left-wing politicians don't necessarily tell the truth. And just look at how Biden is running, ruining and destroying the United States. And the endless lies that he tells.
And Trump isn't. Trump is a truth teller, is he?
Right. OK, I tell you what.
Well, Trump's not in power at the moment. Joe Biden's running the country.
I'm blowing the full-time whistle. I'm blowing the full-time whistle, both of you. Thank you very, very much. That is why we call it the Clash, people. God.